welcome to RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay. It is the second to last episode of this season, so it's coming to an end slowly, but this week we are in Berlin, which is now hopefully getting into spring, I would hope so, and I'm going over to visit my friend Christo. Hi Christo!
Hi Ralph, how are you?
I'm very well, and how are you on this Sunday?
I am good. Spring doesn't really, show yet, but yeah, we're definitely getting there. I mean, yesterday was really sunny, but today it's kind of raining, so hopefully that's going to improve.
Well, that's been like this whole spring. Is like warm, cold, warm, cold. It can't really make up its mind.
This is Berlin for you. This is Berlin spring. That's what we get. It's like, the temperature goes up like a couple of degrees and we're like, yeah, let's go to the lake.
And then it's freezing. Yes, absolutely. Well, let's bring into the questions. What do you prefer? I call you name, pronouns, and title.
Christo, any pronoun, really, and no title.
And no title?
No title.
Okay, cool. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, so I am a Greek transplant in Berlin. I've been living here for the past 11 years, so more than a decade. I've been sober for 2 years and 2 months, and what else? And I'm into rope. I'm a rigger.
You're a rigger.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And completely sober, clear-headed, or social drinker? You've already kind of mentioned it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, for me there are really no halfways, because so I know that the second that I'm gonna let go and I'm gonna be like, okay, so maybe I can have a drink, like before I know it I'm gonna be like hitting the pipe again, so I'm staying away. I'm not a normie.
Fantastic.
I've acknowledged that I am not a normie and I cannot use or drink socially altogether a while ago, and I'm sticking with it. If it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Fantastic. And well done on the 2 years and 2 months. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yay. What is clear play to you and why is it important?
Real clear play is like being 100% present. So while I was using, I spent a lot of time trying to be absent. My body was like all over the place. My mind was also all over the place. So now that I'm clean, it's all about being there. I cannot even play with people that are using or that are drinking, because a part of me is like, you're not 100% there, like I'm touching you, but like, do you feel this? Do you feel the rope like around you? So yeah, real clear play for me is like abstinence from everything, and I'm a bit like absolute when it comes to that.
Yeah, it can be challenging, especially if you go, not that any of us remember at this point, going to a club and so on, and you are interested in a guy and he's either high or drunk. What do you do with a person like that? And it's slightly awkward as a sober person to go into that environment. For example, like you're in Berlin, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers will know places like Berghain and so on, which can be a lot of fun, but it's also a very tricky environment to navigate.
Absolutely. So right before actually in the beginning, when I first decided that I'm going to stop using and I'm going to start stop drinking, I decided to go to snacks. And for those of you who don't know what snacks is, it's Berghain, which is the biggest and more successful club in Europe, or it has been for a very long time. Opens its doors with the basement, which is a sex club, and all of a sudden, you have a 3-floor building, industrial building, turning into a sex club. And I decided to go there. And I went there sober. And it was the first time I've been going there for years. It happens twice a year, and it was the first time that I went there sober. and in a way it helped me a lot in my recovery because all of a sudden I went there and I realized, you know, they were like really hot guys, beautiful people, coming up to me like, you know, with one eye looking there and the other one like looking like in a totally different direction. And I'm like, back in the day, I'm like, I was like that. And yeah, it was a complete turn off. And
it's weird when you go into a setting you were used to going into either drunk or high, and all of a sudden you're taking those rose tinted glasses off, and you just see, not that this is not me shaming people who still do it, and of course have your fun, but it looks a lot more messy when you're sober.
Absolutely.
And you know what's going on, and you can just see everything's going on, and like you said, the eyes are looking 10 different directions when they're trying to look at you, and you kind of go, it's like, I used to find this as attractive in a guy.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely don't anymore. It's
something that is I find it really interesting, because the fact that, you know, those like rose glasses that you mentioned before, you know, the second that they were off, like I didn't feel triggered, and that is something that really changed for me. I used to think, so they say, you know, that the mind of an addict is a very dangerous neighborhood to be in, and every time that I would think about it, I would think to myself like, oh no, I could never go back then, because, you know, I used to use there and I have all these memories. So like I was like playing this tape in my head, thinking like, oh, why it could go wrong. And then the second that I was there, I'm like, nope, thank you very much, nope, it's not gonna work for me. I still stayed, you know, I still had fun, but I didn't feel triggered, because I saw what before I wasn't able to see. And also it's really interesting because recently I went through my phone and I started deleting videos and photos from back in the day. And I saw a couple of videos that I swear to God, back then I thought I was like, I'm the shit, look at me. And then like, I look at the videos, I'm like, fucking hell, that exists in the cloud. Like, you know, people could see this, like delete permanently.
Yeah, I must admit, and this is, I think I did it in lockdown. I had a separate folder on my computer with questionable videos, if you could say, from my past. And for some reason, I hadn't been able to let them go. Not that I looked at them, because that would be massively triggering, because I was very high in those videos. But it was first now I've been okay to go, I can delete these. I don't need them in my life.
Yeah.
And that was quite liberating, and kind of letting go of that past, because I used to use those videos as my own porn, because I thought I looked so hot in these videos. I didn't.
Yeah.
It was messy. It was not very attractive, and I'm quite happy they're not. They don't exist anymore, because it's just a. I don't want to forget my past, but it's a part of my past, and why would I look at these videos anyway at this point?
I mean, there is something that, you know, that I often say to my sponsors, and like that is something that I realized, I was lucky to realize quite early in my recovery, that the further you move away from the point in your life where using was like so ugly and so painful, the further you move away from that point, the less ugly it seems. So, you know, if it wasn't for these videos, in my head I would still be like, oh yeah, but I was so sexy, when in fact, you know, I was a hot mess. Not even hot, I was a sweaty mess, I wasn't a hot mess. So it's a good thing, you know, that these videos are there. And, you know, if I think about it, it took me a long time, like 2 years, more than 2 years, to actually like start deleting these videos. And the reason, again, that it took me so long is because in my head I'm like, oh, but what if I see something, you know, and I get triggered? when in fact, reality, it's the story that we tell ourselves, when in fact reality was like, no, I need to see this, like, to confirm that I'm in the right path.
Absolutely. Sometimes we need a stark reminder of our past, and that's if we're talking like going to 12-step groups and so on. That is also where newcomers helps people have longer clean time, because it's also a reminder to us where we came from and where we don't want to go back to again.
Yeah.
And it's a healthy reminder that, and then like going to a club, seeing people like gurning and sweating and not looking very sexy is also a massive reminder that is not what I want to be doing anymore. All fun for them if they want to have that kind of fun, but I don't need that anymore. So you mentioned you are a Greek transplant, or I love that word, transplant. I never heard that before. As I mentioned, it's like I would just call myself an immigrant. But so how long have you been in Berlin?
I've been in Berlin for 11 years now. For 11
years.
Really, really long years, long messy years. And yeah, I honestly, right before, like around 3 years ago, I thought to myself, like, I probably need to move away from Berlin, because, like, if I was being honest with myself, like, the thoughts that were going through my head is like, I fucked everyone that I wanted to fuck.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. I'm like, people like hate me. The people that don't hate me, I hate, because obviously, being in active addiction really messy. So I'm like, what else is here? And it's been like for the past 2 years. The second that I got clean, it was like literally the veil parted in a way, and I'm like, oh my god, why did I not know about this city that I've been living for, like, for the past like 9 years? So yeah, I've been living in Berlin for the past 11 years, but like honestly, I only started experiencing the city and literally living in the city for the past couple of years.
So if I may ask, were you using before you moved to Berlin, or is that something that happened in Berlin?
I have been using... So, I started my story in a nutshell. So, I have been working in clubs and in bars since I was 16. But I didn't drink back then, I didn't do anything. And I was being like, yes, I'm going to serve it, but I'm not going to participate in it. And I've been in parties where, like, they would like pass the drugs like this. And I would be like, no, thank you. And then when at some point, when I turned 19, I thought to myself, like, what the hell, I may as well try. So I was a recreational user back then. So, I would do it like, once every 2 months, or, once every, like, 3 months. When I lived in London, I was doing it like literally like once every 2 months with my partner at the time. And by it, I mean, like, again, recreational, like, some MDMA, like, again, super, like, dangerous because they're gateway drugs, like, in my opinion, but it was still under control. And and then when I, around 12 years ago, it started to be problematic, because I started, like, all the rules that I had set down, I started like breaking them. So, one of the rules that I had is like, never use, or never, again, it was like sort of like the rules that I had. Never use unless you're in a good mood. Never use because you want to get in a good mood. Because chances are, that it's not going to take you like good places. And at some point I broke that. Another, rule that I had was like, and it's a stupid rule, I know, but it was like, never pay for it, because for some reason, like, if somebody, like, offers you...
No, I fully get that. I completely get that. It's like, I don't want my own dealer, because that's becoming a problem then.
Yes.
Yeah, I fully get that.
So, another, it was like, as long as somebody, like, gives it to you, you're just being, like, social. But the second that that you're going to start buying it, that becomes problematic. And the last rule that I broke is that I thought to myself, even when I was, like, neck deep already into, like, using, hold on, give me a second. So even when I was like neck deep in using, I thought that I would never inject, because I'm like everything is fine, and like it's already problematic as it is. The second that I'm gonna need to like to violate myself, and like the violate was going back then, because right now it's like it's full on violation regardless how you do it. But the second that I have to do this, like that is too much. And I broke that rule as well. And before I knew it, like anything was game. So yeah, but it became really, really hard to control, like for the past, like the last 5 years of my using. I ended up being like homeless in that period. I ended up, lying like that my life depended on it. I ended up like doing like much worse things that yeah, I don't really feel comfortable yet talking about, but yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. It's not. It's sometimes these stories can be very, very hard to talk about, and it's a part of us, and it will always be a part of us. It's. I definitely have my stories where I'm not proud of it, and it's just, yeah, especially also it was the turning point when you start injecting, and it's one of those things that just happens, and like you say, gateway stuff, and you just kind of, it merges into one weekend to another, and then all of a sudden you're stuck in a merry-go-round when it comes to drug taking.
Absolutely. Like first of all, as I said before, first of all, it would start like, oh no, I'm going to do it like, every, 2 months. Then it became every other weekend. Then it became every weekend. Then before you knew it, like, it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And before you knew it, it was Thursday. And if it's Thursday, why not start, like on Tuesday?
Oh, I used to keep a calendar to just see, okay, I'm doing this weekend, so I need this recovery time so I can do drugs there. And that seemed very reasonable to me, to keep a calendar around my drug taking, because I didn't want to be completely horrible when I'm with normal friends, because it takes me 5 days to recover. So I was kind of calculating that. I also, at one point, which was to try controlling it, was I kept a list of how much I used, how many lines, how many bumps, how many pills, how many slams. I also kept a list on who I was safe with and who I wasn't safe with. I still have those lists, which is a good reminder to myself where I came from. To start with, that tool kind of worked for me to kind of measure how much I was doing, and it kind of put it in perspective. But as you know, with everything, it works to start with, and then it just doesn't work, and then you do it anyway, and then you just keep going. So
tell me. I just wanted to say that
go.
I just want to say that it's really funny, because the things that that I would use as a way to measure myself, so like how much I used, or the quantities, or like the frequency. In the beginning, like we're like, okay, so I have to be careful not to go over the limit. And after a while, it's sort of like, after a while, I think that that the change came like this. It became like a sort of like a contest with myself, if that makes sense. I'm like, oh, last time, no, I can take more than you, and I'm like, no, that was supposed to be, your your safety net. You shouldn't like go against it, but like it's the mind of the alcoholic. Well, I call it the alcoholic mind, but it's it's the addict mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, your limit keeps moving. The goalpost keeps getting moved, and it's just what happens. So you've been 2 years and 2 months sober and clear-headed. Well done, you, which is amazing. What brought you to that point? What made the change? What helped you to get to this point now?
I wish I could say that that I had an epiphany and I was like, oh no, I see the light. But the reason is like it's much more superficial. So I was injecting and I had run out of spots to shoot. So I was the kind of person who was like, I was super persistent. So I was the person, that I would go to the sex party and people would be like already engaging, playing, and I would be like, no, no, no. And I would just be like a bloody mess. So at some point I just decided that, okay, this is it. And also, this is a testament to how nuts I was, because I thought to myself, like, this is it, I don't have any more veins, so what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna stop for a week, because as we know, veins grow like in trees, and like in a week I would be like completely new. I would have a new circulatory system. So I stopped for a week, and there was really something interesting that started happening then. I started enjoying not being high. I've been high for so long, and as I said, especially like towards at the end, I was using daily, and it wasn't like, it wasn't even, it wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't like, oh, what we're gonna do is that I'm gonna use and I'm gonna go have sex. These were like, the good, like the good days, the good opportunities. It was me in my room using. Crying by myself, crying for 7 to 8 hours, and then repeating. So I really enjoyed that first week when I was okay, and that was like, that was a luxury for me to spend like a whole week where I was like, oh, look at that, no need to cry, like, no drama, no nothing. So that happened, and
it's like the drugs were causing the problems,
right? It's like, who would have thought? I would tell people like, oh my god, I feel horrible, like my whole body is aching, like, and I'm having so many problems, and they would be like, maybe it's the drugs. I'm like, no, it's probably something I ate, like completely like oblivious to the truth, and. So at some point, like a small parenthesis, at some point I was, like, many of us, I tried to kill myself at some point, and I was hospitalized. And after I spent like, 2 weeks in suicide watch, and then the doctor, like, and it was obvious, it was clear. I told them, about the drugs and blah blah blah, but I was mostly telling them, like, the reason, like, my ex was like mean to me and all that stuff. Like, I was telling them my story. And then when the doctor said, like, okay, but for us to keep on treating you, you have to stop using drugs. And I remember thinking to myself, like, and I didn't just think it to myself, I said it out loud. I'm like, but drugs aren't my problem. Are you not listening? It's like, how could I know?
It's like it was so obvious for some reason.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, how could I not see this? How could I have known?
It was like staring in my face, but never mind.
Yeah.
So when you became sober, and I know definitely from my own story, fetish could be triggering or problematic. Did you find navigating your sex drive with not having the drugs in your system difficult, and how did you manage that?
So I was sober for 3 months before and during these 3 months I was completely I was not thinking about sex, because obviously, sex and drugs came together. So, like, take away the drugs, like, the sex drive wasn't there. So at some point, like after 3 months, it was my consciously, I thought to myself, like, oh, I'm like, oh, I haven't had sex for 3 months. I'm gonna try to do it. And that was before I came into the rooms. So I was a couple of weeks before, or maybe a week before I decided to, to have sex. My flatmate, who I was living with for a year and a half, had a psychotic episode, and he had to be hospitalized. And nothing keeps you further away from drugs as having to put a pot under the ass of your closest friend until that point, to take care of him. So once that happened, I was already, I want nothing to do with drugs, because it was a drug induced psychotic episode. So I was very clear in my head. I'm I'm not gonna do drugs. Drugs bad. And then the second that I decided to have sex, I met with a guy, and everything was really, really cool. And then the thought hit me like a fucking thunder, stop. I'm I need drugs. And that really brought me to my knees. I'm everything, in my sane mind told me, that drugs bad. And still, when the thought came, I'm I don't know how to handle this. So obviously, after that, I started going to the rooms, and I also completely disassociated from my sexuality, and to the point where I spent the first time that I found myself in a room with with other men, where one of them took his shirt off. I had a panic attack, because I was okay, what does this mean? Where is it going to take me? I was completely unprepared for something like that. So obviously fetish did not appear until after my first year. So I stayed sober for the sober and celibate for the first year, and it was after that when I started re-engaging with my sexuality, that fetish, kink, and drugs were separated enough for me to be okay, so this is bad, this is the bad part of it, and this is the good part of it. And that's how it started. That's how I managed to navigate, baby steps. I'm still not 100% sure, that I got it right, and and that was actually something that really worried me about doing this today, because I'm I'm still a newbie to this. I've only been doing it for a year. But then I thought to myself, even if it's just been a year, I'm still a kinkster at heart. So,
well, to be honest, I don't think it matters how long or how new, or if you're an old timer. I think you still always learn new stuff. And also doing these podcasts, I've had people write to me where they kind of oh, your guest said and this, and I really related to it. So there might be someone just sitting, oh, I've only been doing it a year as well. Maybe I should listen to this guy, because he might have some information I might be able to use. So no matter where you're on your journey, I think it's important to be open and honest, and just kind of just say how it is, because I think there is not enough sober fetish role models.
Yeah.
Especially in Europe.
Yeah.
There's not enough of them.
I find that we tend to live in this picture perfect sort of we tend to go for this picture perfect sort of role models in a way, for the people that no, everything is like this or everything is like that. But the matter of fact is that life, just as fetish life, or just sobriety, is fucking messy. So there is absolutely no reason for me, that is something that I was actually talking with my sponsor a while ago. There is absolutely no reason for me to come here and be no, everything is perfect, like everything, like, because it's fucking isn't, like we just do the best we can, like, day in, day out, and that's all that should matter. So if somebody relates to something that I say, it's probably we relate through our we don't relate through our message only, we also relate through our mess, mostly, I find. So I hope somebody can relate to my mess.
Oh, I'm now 3.5 years down the line, and there's still things I don't understand. So don't worry, it's just what it is, and it's nice to hear that you've been able to split it. Because I know when chems and drug taking is so integrated with our fetish lives, it's so hard to pull them apart, because all of a sudden a smell and a taste or a touch becomes a trigger. I know of guys who can't be around guys smoking cigars because that's a trigger.
Yeah.
I, for the longest time, couldn't stand the smell of rubber or leather because it would be a trigger, which is absolutely awful for me because, as you can tell, leather is a big part of my life.
Really?
So, yeah, a little bit. So as soon as that was split, it was such a nice feeling being able to touch leather and actually enjoy it for what it was and not what I would do in it. And it's funny you mentioned that you say, or you wish you could say you had an epiphany and that's how you stopped. For me, when I stopped was because it's slightly controversial, but I went on anti-anxiety medication, so it took my sex drive away. So it also took my drive to use drugs away.
Yeah.
Because it was so connected. Of course, I'd done a lot of work and also to come to that place, but still, it was a big factor. All of a sudden, I didn't have this nagging horniness all the time that was so connected to using drugs. So it just gave me the space to allow me to have the time of not using and recovering from it. I'm now, I came off the anti-anxiety medications last year to kind of figure out, it's a good thing to do that in lockdown, I can tell you that. But it was also to figure out, where is my brain at now? Mm-hmm. Am I okay? Because I suffer with massive anxiety. I had mild depression at the time. And because I've been using drugs for so long, I didn't know how to navigate my own emotions. That being extremely happiness or extreme sadness or anger or so on. Because as everyone knows when they come into recovery, when your emotions come back, they don't form an orderly queue.
Oh, no.
They come all at once. And it's hard when you've been numbing your emotions for so long to navigate them. So having this medication I was on for almost 3 years just kind of made it more manageable and not all consuming. And I could do a lot of work on myself as well and how to react. Now, do I still get anxiety? Do I still get depressed? Absolutely. But I also know what to do with it.
Yes.
I know that if I'm depressed one day, it's okay to be in my bed the whole day watching Netflix. That is perfectly fine because I might feel better the next day. If it had been before that and I hadn't done all the work, my reaction would have been, I know how to fix this. Let me go out and have sex and use drugs.
You see, that is something that I find that it's the biggest problem, or the biggest challenge, if you like, not problem, the biggest challenge with getting sober, because while you use, there is a pill or there is a substance for anything, I want to feel, I want to feel happy, I'm going to take this. I want to feel down, I'm going to take this. I want to feel sexual, I'm going to take this. I want to to feel better about myself, I'm gonna use sex, which is something that I did a lot. So as a sort of a currency, and then when you get sober, you go oh shit, I cannot just be I cannot just take something right now and feel it. The only way out is through. I have to to stay with my emotions. I have to like map them in a way. I have to like to go through them, to experience them, and then possibly like learn something out of it. So the next time that is going to happen, because it's going to happen again, it's a bit easier to navigate. So yeah, I think that this is like the biggest challenge, being able to change your mindset. I like honestly, I when I quit using drugs, I had like cravings, like maybe like a handful of times in these past years. The biggest challenge for me was when I decided to quit smoking, because smoking was like every single
I've
day.
heard that before. I've heard that before. Yeah, I've heard that before.
There hasn't been one day like I'm without cigarettes now for the past like almost a year and a half. There hasn't been one day in the first year that I didn't think to myself like, oh shit, I need a cigarette. And that is the reason for that is because like cigarettes like had a sort of like a function in my life. Like I could take a cigarette every time that I was stressed, and then all of a sudden like I wasn't stressed anymore. So like being able to let that go, to completely let go, it was like it was the biggest challenge for me, and still until today, like I fight with like all of a sudden I'm gonna feel like I feel bad about something that happened, and I find myself like until 3 o'clock in the apps, like looking for something, and I know that I'm not gonna hook up because it's 3 o'clock like on a Tuesday. And the people that are online are not the kind of people that I'm going to hook up with, and why am I doing it? It's the same mindset. Like I don't want to feel my feelings, and I have to snap out of it.
Yeah,
it's hard to get rid of, but
it's weird with like the apps and so on. I have to admit, at some point, some days I do fall into the app hole, and I just sit like this for hours on end, and I'm not getting anywhere, and I don't really want to do anything. I think it's more a question of instant validation from someone.
Yeah.
And like with everything else, you kind of have to think about, what is my reasoning behind this? Am I trying to make myself feel better, or is it just to add to, I already feel great, so I'm a little bit horny and I want to have sex? But in most cases, it is an escapism. It's trying to fix something with something external, and that can be problematic. So I'm very mindful of using the apps, because I need to be using them the right way, if there is a right way anyway. But it's what is my reasoning behind trying to hook up with someone online? Is it because I feel like shit and I want someone to validate me, or is it because I'm horny, and that's fair enough?
I think that the keyword is what you said, mindful. Many times, when I first re-downloaded the apps, I was very aware that I was doing it like for self-validation. Like I'm not yet in the mindset of like just like fucking around like there's no tomorrow, but it would still be nice to see like where I am, and to get like some validation. So I started doing this, but like being very mindful, and also like very often I'm gonna find myself like, not just with the apps, like in anything. Like there was a time when a friend of mine passed because of drugs, and I was still using. It was like before I stopped using, and I went on a binge for a week, where I was going from fuck day to fuck day to fuck day. I went on a crazy bender, like in an attempt to just like not feel my feelings. And I want to believe, that it all played a part in me being where I am today. But yeah.
No, it's I think like for a lot of recovering addicts, especially people who engage in fetish life and so on, we have to question our actions quite a lot. It's like, why am I doing these things? Is this healthy for me? And not that we have to be paranoid about our actions all the time, but it is reasonable to go, okay, should I be going to this guy's house? Am I in the right frame of mind? Is this the smart move? And I think a lot of people do that when they're in recovery.
Yeah, like I was yesterday was with two of my best friends from the rooms, and we were walking in this park, and like I started telling this story that for some reason in my head that story was like completely like, oh yeah, this thing happened over there, and I'm like, I could have been killed, like, and like looking back, I'm like, there's a bunch of times that I don't know why I'm still here. I did some crazy stupid things. I hang out with people that I really shouldn't, and yeah, it was trying to numb out the my internal monologue in a way. I never thought that in the process I would tone down everything else that was dangerous as well. And yeah, I don't know why we do it, and I don't know how we do it. At this stage of the game, if I see someone who is like, I think that I am blessed, I can tell crazy from a mile away. So now somebody says like something like and I'm like, oh no, this is bad for me. But there was this because I can tell where it's going to take me. But there was this time, especially when I first came into the rooms, that the second that I would be sitting like that, and like I would see somebody walking through the door, and I would go like, who is that? Automatically I knew, and it took me a while to know what to do with that information that could be told. But the second that I would see someone walking through the door, and I would be like, husband, I knew that person was a newcomer, and a person with more issues than Bob. But back then I didn't know what to do with the information.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned to me that you are now a rope enthusiast. I'm not even gonna say the name you said it was, because I know the name but I don't know how you pronounce it.
So it's called shibari.
Shibari, that's what it is, yes. So when did you get into that?
I think it happened like it was the first kink, the first fetish that started manifesting. So I got very much into somatic experiences, and that is just like not being in my head, just like full on like living, experiencing things with my body, and I tend to be like a very when it comes to sex, when it comes to interaction, I tend to stay a lot in my head. So when I first started experimenting with ropes, first of all, I was a photographer for for more than a decade. So aesthetically, it was like a hard on for the brain, seeing someone tied up so beautifully, and also I realized that it also felt a little bit like a hug when I started doing it. And later on I came to find that the reason that works is because it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's it's the equivalent when you tie someone when you are tied. It's kind of like you have a weighted blanket on you. It kind of feels like a hug. And that was the first thing that came up. And so far, obviously, I like my leather, which is how long has it been? It's been a while now that we're talking, and I haven't mentioned that I'm vegan. So I want this. I want this to be something that works to vegans' benefit. And so being vegan and liking leather, it's a bit contradicting, but I'm trying to navigate this. As I said, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I can imagine that's slightly difficult. But yeah, I don't know. Rope work has never really done much for me, but I can see the beauty in it, and as you say, it's a hug. It's also a piece of art. Some of the work I've seen when people really do like proper um, rope work, where it's so intricate. It's quite something, and I can imagine that whole process as either the person doing it or receiving it is quite intimate.
Yeah. So it's very intimate. It doesn't always have to be sexual. So like, mm, I like tying up. So in the past year, I haven't really been dating much. I haven't really been like like going out there. But I have been like almost religiously. I have been like spending a couple of hours a week, like with rope myself. So it is something like it's a sort of like an art, but at the same time, it's not like okay, so I'm just gonna tie again. I'm gonna keep you like this, and you have to stay there. It's like it's a whole process. It's sort of like I'm using the rope as a medium to have like a sort of conversation. It's kind of like it's a mean of conversation. It's like a language, um, and it is really really beautiful. There's also like the part of the restriction as well in it, and yeah, it was the first time that I saw it. I'm like, yeah, here we are here. I've arrived.
It's nice when you find something that really where you just feel like this is home for me. This is my kink. This is where I feel attracted to, and I want to learn more about. So that's really nice, especially in I think at least for me in early sobriety, I had to relearn my kink a bit because I had to figure out what was the drug taking and what was me. So there's definitely things I'm relearning now and starting to love again. So it must be lovely to find something that really tickles your fancy, if you could say.
Um, in the beginning, when I first started trying to experiment with Kink while I was using, it was all about me not being there. It was all about me like being absent. It was like, let's meet and you can do whatever you want to do because already I am not really there. When it comes to Kink now, it's the exact opposite, and it's how to put this. It's kind of like if you're revisiting like a place that you were, like a city that you've been to, and and it's kind of like scary and weird, and then you revisit it, when you are sober, or when you have like a better company, you go like, oh my god, this is actually beautiful, and I don't know, there's something really really beautiful about and magical, even if I can use this word, about redefining who you are and being able to say like this part of me was the sick part of me, and this part is like it's actually something that I enjoy regardless for X Y reasons. Like I'm not getting so much into the why are you doing this sort of like part of trying to explain things. It's just there, and being able to still not refuse yourself the pleasure of engaging to it just because you changed your habits or your drug taking. I find that this is like the most fascinating part. When I first came, like I said it before, and I'm probably going to say it another 1,000 times. When I first came to recovery, the whole reason that I stayed sober was because I wanted to live my best life, and Kink has always been like
part of my life. Maybe not in that sense, and maybe, because of my other habits, it was taking it down like, a weird road, but it was always there. So
it overshadows your fetish life, and hopefully when people come out of it, they can re-engage with it and actually enjoy it for what it actually really is, and not being overshadowed by something quite uncomfortable. And yeah.
Absolutely. And also, it has a lot to do with the partners that you choose. So, back in the day, there was there was, as I said before, there was zero consent, and which is like, it's a cornerstone of fetish. So back then, no one asked for consent. I am pretty sure that I was raped many times. And if I had a little bit more of my mind, of my conscious back then, I would have been able to maybe see it, but I didn't have it. So now that I am here, I am able to choose my partners, and I am able to choose the people that I feel safe with to practice my fetish. I do go through these moments because, as I said before, it's been a really long year. So even these brief moments where you meet with someone, where I'm like, yeah, let's do this, and we will spend a couple of hours. This can, expand to, I can talk about fetish for hours and hours, and I'm afraid that sometimes I become too here.
It's a lovely thing when you have something you love and you really get into, and you can almost be a little bit like a kid in a candy store when it comes to fetish, when it's someone you have a connection with, or you're practicing with rope work, because it does require a lot of practice, I could imagine.
Yes.
We're coming to the end of our time, and it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you about these different things. I know you're a great, you host several meetings in Berlin as well, which is absolutely great. It's great to give back to the community for the people who helped you to get to where you are now. If anyone's watched this and actually gotten something out of it, and kind of connected with some of the stuff you said, is there anywhere they can come in contact with you, like Instagram or Twitter and so on?
On Instagram, you can find me as Psychomagnet, because old habits die hard. Christo Tee on Facebook, and also Christo Tee on Twitter.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been absolutely a joy to talk to you.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you very much for having me.
And hopefully I should be able to get to Berlin soon.
Yay!
Yeah.
Come over. Soon the weather, hopefully the weather is going to get better soon, so we're going to be able to go up in the parks and just enjoy.
Yeah, Berlin is beautiful in spring and summertime, absolutely. So there's so many open spaces there.
Hope to see you soon.
So hope to see you soon as well. Thank you very much for coming. And that was Christo. I'll see you again in 2 weeks' time, where I will be heading to Chicago to talk to one of my friends from there, and it will be the last episode of the season, unfortunately, but there will be news coming after that. So thank you very much, and see you in 2 weeks.